The first cracks were almost invisible. At least, to me, they were. They didn't arrive with a bang. No heated arguments, no sudden disappearances. They arrived as tiny, almost forgettable moments that, when pieced together later, painted a picture I could no longer ignore. It started with small changes in their routines. My husband had always been the type to keep to himself in the evenings after work, read the newspaper, watch the news, maybe sit quietly in the balcony with a cup of tea. But slowly, his evenings began to revolve around my sister. They'd sit together on the couch, scrolling through their phones, laughing at videos, or reminiscing about childhood stories. Stories I was part of, but suddenly I felt like an outsider listening from the kitchen doorway. I remember one night in particular, I was chopping vegetables for dinner when I heard them burst out laughing in the living room. It wasn't the usual casual laughter. It was deep, uncontrollable, like two teenagers sharing an inside joke. I walked in, curious. "What's so funny?" I asked with a smile. They both looked at me at the same time, and then quickly at each other. "Nothing," my sister said, too quickly. "Just a silly meme." My husband nodded, still grinning. "Yeah, nothing important." For a second, I felt a strange flicker in my chest. It wasn't anger, more like a quiet sting, like I'd just arrived late to my own conversation. I pushed the thought away. They were family. What harm could there be? But that flicker kept coming back. My daughter was the first to openly voice what I was too afraid to acknowledge. One evening, while helping me set the table, she spoke carefully. "Mom, does it ever bother you, the way Dad and Auntie are these days?" I paused mid-step. "Bother me? No. Why should it?" She placed the plates down, avoiding my eyes. "It's just, they seem closer, like really close, closer than before." I sighed. "She's his sister-in-law. She's staying with us. They're just being friendly. But you don't see the way they look at each other sometimes," she whispered. Her words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't want to breathe them in. I laughed it off again, trying to sound confident. "You're overthinking it. Families share bonds. It's natural." But when she left the room, I sat down slowly, feeling something uneasy stir inside me. The house didn't change overnight. It was gradual, almost like watching a plant grow in time-lapse. One day, my sister started joining my husband on his morning walks, something we used to do together. She said, "He asked me. I was sleeping." I didn't think much of it at the time. Another day, I noticed they had developed their own little phrases and jokes, things only they understood. If I asked, they'd explain kindly, like I was someone catching up. Even meals started to feel different. There was a new energy at the table, not tense, not hostile, but charged in a way I couldn't quite name. I'd tell a story, and they'd exchange glances. I'd make a suggestion, and she'd echo it to him seconds later, and he'd nod to her more than to me. It was like their rhythm had become synchronized in a way mine no longer was. I started staying up later than usual, sitting quietly in the living room after everyone went to bed. Sometimes I'd hear soft laughter from the balcony, where they'd sit talking under the night sky. I'd tell myself it was innocent, but deep down, I was beginning to feel something I had never felt in my own home before, like I didn't belong. There were other signs, too. Subtle, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. My husband started dressing differently. A new shirt here, a dab of cologne there. He'd say he wanted to feel fresh. I believed him. My sister started smiling more. Not the sad, broken smile of someone recovering from heartbreak, but the glowing smile of someone who feels noticed, chosen, important. I was happy for her, or at least I told myself I was. One weekend, my daughter and I planned to go shopping. I invited my sister to come along like I always did. She hesitated. "Oh, I promised him I'd help rearrange the study today." I blinked. "The study? That's his space." She laughed lightly. He asked me to help. You know how he gets when it comes to books. They spent the entire day together while my daughter and I were out. When we came home, the study was neatly arranged, and they were sitting together on the couch, watching TV with the kind of comfortable ease that made my heart ache. Later that night, my daughter came into my room, her voice soft but firm. "Mom, you're seeing it now, right?" I didn't answer. "Please don't pretend you don't." I looked at her worried eyes, her quiet strength, and all I could say was, "Families go through phases." But even as I said it, I wasn't convinced. The emotional distance between my husband and I began to grow quietly. He wasn't unkind, he wasn't cold, he was distracted. When I spoke to him, sometimes he seemed half listening. When I asked for his help, my sister would offer before he could answer. They had created their own little corner in my home, and I was slowly being pushed out of it without a single harsh word. One evening, I tried to talk to him, just us. I waited until she went out to meet a friend. I made tea, set it on the table, and said gently, "I miss us." He looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Just us, our talks, our walks, our time together." He smiled faintly. "We still have that." But we didn't, and I think we both knew it. I almost confronted my sister once, too. I had walked into the kitchen unexpectedly and found her on the phone. She was laughing softly, her voice lower than usual. When she saw me, she straightened immediately. "Oh, I was just talking to a friend." I nodded slowly, but something in her eyes told me the friend wasn't on the other end of that line. The real shift came when my daughter came home earlier than expected one afternoon. I was in the backyard hanging clothes when she rushed to me, her face pale. "Mom, come inside." Her voice scared me. I followed her quietly. She led me to the hallway, near the slightly open door of the study. Through the gap, we saw them sitting too close on the couch. My husband had his hand on her shoulder, and she was leaning into him, laughing softly. It wasn't anything physical, but the intimacy was undeniable. The air between them felt different. I stepped back before they could see me. My heart was racing, my hands cold. My daughter looked at me, searching my face for a reaction. I forced a weak smile. "It's nothing," I whispered, though my voice trembled. She shook her head. "Mom, please don't lie to yourself." That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the living room again. The house was quiet, but inside me, everything was loud. My thoughts, my doubts, my fear. I stared at the old wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded almost cruel. I knew something was happening. I didn't have proof yet. I didn't have a confession, but a woman knows when the foundation of her home has started to shake. I'll never forget that night. It wasn't a stormy evening like in the movies. There was no thunder, no rain hammering against the windows. It was a clear, quiet night, painfully ordinary, the kind of night when you expect peace, not the kind of truth that tears through the calm like a silent knife. My daughter had come home late from college. I was sitting on the couch, holding that same family photo frame in my hands. The ticking clock on the wall echoed through the room. I wasn't waiting for anything, but something in the air felt different, heavy, still. She walked in, set her bag down, and stood by the doorway. Her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, in a voice that was soft but trembling, she said, "Mom, I saw something today." My hands froze on the photo frame. I turned slowly to look at her. "What did you see?" I asked carefully. She swallowed hard. "I don't even know how to say it, but I need to tell you." She sat down next to me, her shoulders tense, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I came home earlier than usual today. I was in the backyard when I heard voices from the study. I peeked through the window and she stopped, tears filling her eyes. "What, Beta?" I whispered. "I saw Dad in Auntie. They weren't just sitting together this time. They were holding each other." Her voice broke on the last words. "It wasn't a friendly hug, Mom. It was different." I didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't even drop the photo frame. I just sat there, as if my body and soul had momentarily separated. My mind tried to reject it. This couldn't be true. This was my husband, my sister, my family. Not them, not like this. She reached for my hand. I didn't believe it either. I waited for a while, thinking maybe I misunderstood, but then I saw Dad. He kissed her on the forehead. Her voice shook with anger and sadness. "I can't forget what I saw, Mom." The world didn't tilt. It didn't shatter in one loud crash. It cracked slowly, like an old wall giving way after years of hidden strain. Quietly, relentlessly. I got up and walked to the kitchen. I needed to breathe. The air in the living room felt too heavy. I poured myself a glass of water, though my hands were trembling so much that a little spilled on the counter. My daughter followed me silently, watching me closely, afraid of what I might do. But I didn't scream. I didn't march into the study to confront them. I couldn't. My mind was spinning with years of memories, birthdays, anniversaries, shared meals, laughter, trust. How could I confront something I couldn't even process yet? Later that night, when the house was asleep, I found myself standing outside the study door, the same door my daughter had pointed to earlier. It was slightly open. The light was still on. I pushed it open quietly. Inside, the room was empty now, but something felt different, like the air itself was holding a secret. I sat down in my husband's chair. For years, this had been his space, filled with books, papers, his favorite pens lined up neatly. But now, it felt like a stranger's room. On the small side table, there were 2 teacups, not one, and a folded blanket on the couch. A small detail, but it hit me like a wave. They'd been spending time here, alone, comfortably, intimately. I touched the edge of one of the teacups and whispered to myself, "How long?" The silence didn't answer. The next day, I watched them carefully, not with suspicion, but with painful clarity. At breakfast, their eyes met for a second too long. When he left for work, she walked him to the door like a wife would. When she talked to him, her voice softened in a way it didn't with anyone else. And when he looked at her, I saw something I had missed before. Familiarity, fondness, guilt. I spent the day in a haze, moving through chores like a ghost. I folded laundry, chopped vegetables, watered plants, but my mind kept replaying my daughter's words. They were holding each other. In the evening, after dinner, I asked him casually, "Are you working late again tonight?" He hesitated. "Yes, a few things to finish in the study." My heart ached. "Do you want some tea?" He smiled faintly. "That would be nice." I made 2 cups, one for him, one for her, and I left them both on the tray. He didn't notice, but I did. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps down the hall, 2 sets. I got up slowly and followed the faint sound to the study. Through the small gap in the door, I saw them. This time, there was no mistaking it. My husband and my sister were sitting close together, holding hands, whispering. There was a softness between them, not passion, but something quieter, more dangerous, emotional betrayal. Trust shifted elsewhere. I stood there for a long moment, my breath shallow. It felt like time had stopped. The people I trusted most in the world were inside that room, building something in the shadows, while I stood outside like a stranger. I didn't open the door. I turned around and walked back to my room, tears silently falling down my face. Not because of anger, but because of the quiet, unbearable heartbreak of knowing the truth. The next morning, I sat with my daughter at the breakfast table. She looked at me, searching for answers. I took her hand and whispered, "You were right." Her eyes filled with tears. "What are you going to do, Mom?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know yet, but I won't let this destroy us." For the first time in weeks, I saw something change in her, a mix of sadness and strength. "Whatever you decide," she said firmly, "I'm with you." That day, something shifted inside me. I wasn't ready for confrontation yet, but I wasn't blind anymore. The quiet betrayal that had been growing in the shadows was now out in the open, at least in my heart. I began to observe, not as a wife or a sister, but as a woman who needed to understand the full truth before deciding what came next. Every shared glance, every whispered word, every late-night light in the study became pieces of a puzzle I could no longer ignore. The turning point wasn't just catching them together. It was the moment I finally stopped lying to myself. The days that followed were heavy. Every corner of the house felt different, like the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of the secret I now carried. The study door that once blended into the hallway now felt like a boundary between truth and illusion. Every evening, the soft click of that door closing behind them cut through me like a whisper I couldn't unhear. But something inside me had changed. I was no longer looking away. I was watching, listening, processing, and quietly, I began to gather myself. I didn't rush into confrontation. I wanted to speak when my heart was steady, not when it was burning. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come from shouting. It comes from clarity. I spent a few days observing them, understanding the rhythm of their moments, their patterns, their excuses. The guilt on their faces became clearer the more I paid attention. One evening, my daughter and I sat together in the kitchen. She had been my quiet anchor through all this, even though I knew it was tearing her up inside. She finally asked, "Mom, when are you going to talk to them?" I took a deep breath. "Soon," I said softly, but not in anger. "I want to remember who I am when I do it." She nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you." Her words gave me a strength I didn't realize I needed. That night, after dinner, I asked my husband to sit with me in the living room. My sister was in her room, and my daughter had gone upstairs. It was just the two of us. He sat down across from me, looking slightly uneasy. "I want to talk," I began. My voice was calm, almost too calm. He nodded cautiously. "Of course. About what?" I looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, the man I had trusted for almost 30 decades. "About you. And her." His face stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Don't," I said quietly. "Please don't lie. I've seen it. And our daughter has seen it too. I know what's happening between you and my sister." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His eyes flickered with guilt, fear, and something else. Relief, maybe? That the silence was finally broken? I continued. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but I'm not. I've seen the way you look at her. I've heard the whispers. I've watched you choose her company over mine again and again. So please, if you have any respect left for me, tell me the truth." The room was quiet, except for the clock ticking on the wall. He lowered his head, and then, in a voice so soft I could barely hear it, he said, "It just happened. We didn't plan it." I closed my eyes for a moment. Those words, "it just happened," cut deeper than any excuse. "How long?" I asked. "A few months," he admitted. "After she moved in, We started talking a lot. She was vulnerable, and I don't know. I made a mistake. The days that followed were heavy. Every corner of the house felt different, like the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of the secret I now carried. The study door that once blended into the hallway now felt like a boundary between truth and illusion. Every evening, the soft click of that door closing behind them cut through me like a whisper I couldn't unhear. But something inside me had changed. I was no longer looking away. I was watching, listening, processing, and quietly, I began to gather myself. I didn't rush into confrontation. I wanted to speak when my heart was steady, not when it was burning. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come from shouting. It comes from clarity. I spent a few days observing them, understanding the rhythm of their moments, their patterns, their excuses. The guilt on their faces became clearer the more I paid attention. One evening, my daughter and I sat together in the kitchen. She had been my quiet anchor through all this, even though I knew it was tearing her up inside. She finally asked, "Mom, when are you going to talk to them?" I took a deep breath. "Soon," I said softly, but not in anger. "I want to remember who I am when I do it." She nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you." Her words gave me a strength I didn't realize I needed. That night, after dinner, I asked my husband to sit with me in the living room. My sister was in her room, and my daughter had gone upstairs. It was just the two of us. He sat down across from me, looking slightly uneasy. "I want to talk," I began. My voice was calm, almost too calm. He nodded cautiously. "Of course. About what?" I looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, the man I had trusted for almost 30 years. "About you. And her." His face stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Don't," I said quietly. "Please don't lie. I've seen it, and our daughter has seen it too. I know what's happening between you and my sister." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His eyes flickered with guilt, fear, and something else, relief, maybe, that the silence was finally broken. I continued. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but I'm not. I've seen the way you look at her. I've heard the whispers. I've watched you choose her company over mine again and again. So please, if you have any respect left for me, tell me the truth. The room was quiet, except for the clock ticking on the wall. He lowered his head, and then, in a voice so soft I could barely hear it, he said, "It just happened. We didn't plan it." I closed my eyes for a moment. Those words, "it just happened," cut deeper than any excuse. "How long?" I asked. "A few months," he admitted. "After she moved in, we started talking a lot. She was vulnerable, and I don't know. I made a mistake." A mistake. Such a small word for something that broke the foundation of a family. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting his words settle like dust in the room. "Do you love her?" I asked. His eyes darted away. "I don't know." That answer told me everything. I stood up slowly. "You should leave the living room now," I said. "We'll talk again tomorrow." He nodded silently and walked away, shoulders heavy, leaving me alone with the sound of the clock. Tick, tick, tick. The next day, I spoke to my sister. That conversation was harder. She was in her room, folding clothes, humming softly like nothing had changed. When I knocked on the door, she turned around, smiling. "Hey, what's up?" I closed the door behind me. "We need to talk." Her smile faded instantly. "About what?" You know exactly what." She froze, the folded shirt slipping from her hands. Did he say something?" I shook my head. "You don't need him to speak. I know." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I was broken. He was kind, and I got attached. I didn't want to hurt you." I felt my chest tighten. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you did. You could have gone anywhere. You could have leaned on me, on friends, on anyone, but you chose him. My husband, the father of my daughter, the man I've built my life with." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing softly. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." I looked at her, my sister, the same person I had shared a childhood with, whose pain I had once comforted, and now she was part of my deepest wound. Some things can't be fixed, but they can be faced. We sat in silence for a long time. Her crying filled the room. My tears came too, but not as an explosion, like a quiet river, steady and inevitable. I finally said, "You can't stay here anymore." She looked up, shocked. "What?" "You need to leave," I said firmly. "For your sake. For mine. For this house. Whatever is between you two ends now. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, broken. "I'll pack my things." That evening, my daughter sat beside me as my sister quietly packed her bags. There were no fights, no dramatic scenes, just silence, broken occasionally by the sound of a zipper closing or a drawer sliding shut. When she walked out of the door, suitcase in hand, she looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks. "I really am sorry." I nodded once. "I know." She left, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. The house felt different immediately. Not lighter, not yet, but honest. The days that followed were painful, but also strangely clear. My husband and I had long conversations, some tearful, some quiet. He admitted his guilt fully. He wanted to stay, to rebuild. I told him I needed time, real time, to decide whether forgiveness was even possible. He accepted it without protest. My daughter remained my pillar. She never pushed me to make a decision quickly. She cooked with me, sat with me in the evenings, held my hand when the silence became too heavy. She had witnessed the breaking of our family, but she also became part of the strength that held me up. One evening, as we sat together, she said softly, "Mom, you're stronger than both of them combined." I smiled weakly. Strength doesn't always feel like strength when you're in it. She squeezed my hand. But it is. I didn't know what the future would hold for my marriage. I didn't know if trust could ever be fully rebuilt. But I knew this. I wouldn't let betrayal define me. I wouldn't let their choices take away my dignity. The resolution wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, filled with honest conversations and difficult truths. And it started with me deciding that I deserved honesty, respect, and peace, whether that meant staying or walking away. I didn't see my sister for a long time after that. She called a few times, sent a letter once. The letter was full of apologies, regrets, and memories of our childhood. I read it in silence. Forgiveness didn't come instantly. It wasn't a switch I could turn on. But I didn't hate her. My pain was real, but so was our shared history. Months passed, and one afternoon, I received a message from her. She had moved to a small town, started a new job, and was trying to rebuild her life. She wrote, "I don't expect anything from you. I just hope that one day, when you think of me, it's not only with pain." I didn't respond immediately. I sat with that message for a long time. Eventually, I wrote back, "Healing takes time. I don't know where we'll end up, but I wish you peace." And I meant it. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't about excusing someone's choices. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger that can keep you stuck. It's about letting go without necessarily letting back in. One morning, months after everything, I found myself looking at that old family photo again, the one that used to bring me pain. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I just saw a moment in time, frozen forever. A family that existed before betrayal, before heartbreak. A moment that had its own truth, even if everything changed after. I placed the photo back on the shelf, not to dwell on the past, but to honor it. Because despite everything, those years were real. They shaped me, loved me, and hurt me. And they made me who I am today. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that family is complicated. Love can wound as deeply as it heals. Trust can break, but so can silence. And sometimes the quiet strength to face the truth is what carries us through. My story didn't end with betrayal. It continued with resilience. It continued with my daughter's strength, my quiet decisions, and my willingness to stand tall even when my heart was broken. And as I watched the sun set that evening, I whispered to myself, I'm still here. I'm still standing. The night I saw them together, my world didn't explode. It quietly cracked, like glass under too much pressure. No sound, just silence, and a truth I didn't want to face. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock in the living room. It was the same clock that had hung there since our wedding day, 28 years ago. Its steady rhythm had always comforted me, but that night, every tick felt louder, almost like it was counting down to something I couldn't stop. I sat on the couch, holding a photo frame in my hands. It was an old picture. My husband, my sister, my daughter, and me. All of us smiling under the afternoon sun at a riverside picnic. I remember that day so clearly. My sister had just moved in after a difficult breakup. My husband welcomed her warmly, and I was grateful. We were family. We supported each other. But that night, sitting alone, staring at that photograph, I felt something inside me twist. I didn't know why. I just knew something had changed. When my daughter came home from college that evening, she found me sitting there, lost in thought. She didn't say anything at first. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered, "Mom, I saw something today. Something I wish I could unsee." My hands froze on the frame. I turned to her slowly. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying for hours. And in that moment, even before she said another word, my heart knew. That was the night the truth came out. Not through screaming or chaos, but through quiet, devastating words that changed everything I believed about love, trust, and family. Before everything changed, our home was warm. Not perfect, but steady. The kind of place where laughter from the kitchen would float down the hallway on Sunday mornings, where the sound of a pressure cooker meant lunch was almost ready, and where the front door never stayed closed for long. Friends, relatives, neighbors, everyone felt welcome. My husband and I had been married for nearly 30 decades. He was quiet, dependable, and thoughtful in his own way. He wasn't the kind of man who made grand romantic gestures, but he had a calming presence. If a light bulb went out, he'd fix it without a word. If I looked tired, he'd silently make me tea. I had grown used to his gentle rhythm, the predictability of his company. Our daughter was our pride. She was in her early 20s, studying at college, but she came home often. She was bright, sensitive, and fiercely protective of the people she loved. She had a way of sensing when something wasn't right, even when no one said anything. She had grown up surrounded by love, and I always wanted her to believe that family is her anchor, no matter what storms come. Then there was my sister. She was 5 years younger than me. Where I was calm and quiet, she was full of life, talkative and emotional. She had always been a little impulsive, sometimes making decisions she'd regret later. I loved her deeply. We had shared so much since childhood. Late-night talks, secrets, fights, forgiveness. She had always looked up to me, and I had always tried to be there for her. A year before that night, her long-term relationship ended badly. It broke her spirit. She had nowhere else to go, so naturally I told her to come live with us for a while. My husband agreed immediately. She's family, he said. She needs us. And for a while, everything felt right. She slipped into our home like she'd always been there. She'd help me in the kitchen, play with our dog, chat with my daughter about college life. Sometimes she'd even stay up late watching TV with my husband while I went to bed early. I didn't think much of it then. I trusted both of them, completely. I remember one particular evening vividly. We were all sitting around the dining table, eating dinner together. My sister was telling some funny story from her past using big gestures and silly voices. My husband was laughing, really laughing, in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I felt happy seeing him smile. It didn't occur to me then that something else might be growing between those shared laughs. Our routines began to shift slowly, almost invisibly. My sister started spending more time in the house during the day, especially when my husband worked from home. She'd bring him tea, sit beside him, and talk about everything, from old memories to her new plans. Sometimes, if I came into the room, they'd both smile at me. It felt innocent, familiar. After all, she was my sister and he was my husband. What could go wrong? My daughter noticed things earlier than I did. One afternoon, while folding laundry together, she said softly, "Mom, do you ever feel like things are different around here lately?" I laughed it off. Different how? She hesitated. I don't know. Auntie and Dad, they're always together now, more than before. I brushed her concern aside. She's just lonely, Beta, and he's just being kind. Don't overthink it. She nodded, but I could see something uneasy in her eyes. Looking back, I think I wanted to believe everything was fine. When you've built a life on trust, it's easier to ignore the cracks than to admit the walls might be breaking. Over the months, my sister found her rhythm in our home. She got a small job nearby. She started dressing up more, smiling more. I was happy for her. She was healing, I thought. Sometimes I'd even joke with her about finding someone new. She'd blush and change the subject. I thought it was sweet. I didn't realize I was missing the signs, the stolen glances, the growing closeness, the invisible lines that were slowly being crossed. I also noticed my husband changing in small ways. He started shaving more regularly, wearing cologne again, and even choosing nicer shirts for casual days. I teased him once. "Are you secretly trying to impress someone?" He chuckled. "You, of course." I smiled and believed him. After all, why wouldn't I? Life has a way of hiding storms behind clear skies. The laughter, the warm meals, the little gestures, they were all still there, but beneath them, something was shifting, quietly and steadily. I remember one particular afternoon, sunny, peaceful, nothing extraordinary. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping tea, while my sister and husband were in the living room watching a movie. I could hear them laughing together, their voices blending into something almost intimate. I paused for a second. Something about the sound made me uncomfortable, like I was listening to a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I shook it off. I'm being silly, I told myself. They're family, that's all. If only I had trusted that little voice inside me. At the time, though, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. A happy home, a supportive husband, a healing sister, a loving daughter. I thought we were unshakable. I thought nothing could come between blood and trust. I was wrong. The weeks after my sister left felt like standing in the quiet after a storm. The house was still the same, but everything inside it had shifted. The walls that once held laughter now held echoes. Every room carried a memory, both beautiful and painful. I spent a lot of time alone during those days. I'd make myself a cup of tea in the morning and sit by the window, watching the world outside move on, even as my own world felt paused. Birds still chirped, neighbors still went on their morning walks. Life continued, indifferent to my heartbreak. And strangely, that gave me comfort, because it reminded me that my story wasn't over, it was just changing. I started to take small steps toward myself. I cleaned spaces that hadn't been touched in years. I opened curtains I usually kept closed. I sorted through old albums, letters, and clothes. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about reclaiming my home, my space, and my peace. My husband and I spoke often, sometimes for hours. Some conversations were quiet, others difficult. There were apologies, there were tears, and there were moments of silence where neither of us knew what to say. I didn't give him easy answers. I didn't promise him forgiveness. I told him that trust is not rebuilt with words alone. It's rebuilt with time, honesty, and consistency. He agreed. He gave me space when I needed it, and he showed up. Not as the man who had broken my trust, but as someone trying to face what he had done without running from it. Whether that would be enough, I didn't know yet, but it was a start. My daughter became my light through it all. She had seen things no child should have to see, even as an adult, yet she handled it with grace and quiet strength. She never spoke ill of her father, but she stood firmly by my side. She was my reminder that love, when rooted in truth, can survive even the hardest storms. One evening, weeks later, we sat together in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft orange and pink hues. She looked at me and asked, "Mom, do you think things will ever go back to the way they were?" I thought for a moment before answering. "No," I said gently. "They won't. But maybe that's okay. Sometimes we're not meant to go back. We're meant to move forward differently." She nodded slowly, understanding.